Blackout, whiteout, pick your side on Friday night. It's been all one-sided. Penn State over Maryland over the last 3 or 4 meetings. The two hook up in the Big Ten opener Friday night in College Park. We got Tim Aiden on the line from Black Shoe Diaries. It's the Penn State platform on SB Nation. Tim, how you doing tonight?
Doing good, Mark.
Start of the Big Ten season here on Friday night. The Terps taking on the Nittany Lions. And as I mentioned, and you are well-versed in these games, of course, in recent history, this has been no contest. I recall the 2014 game. That's the one time Maryland has won as a member of the Big Ten against Penn State. The all-time series is 39-2, so the Nittany Lions obviously have had a much better football history than Maryland. But that 2014 game was James Franklin's first year. They lost at the wire 20-19 in Happy Valley, but the last few years has just been Penn State dominance, 142-20 over the last 3 games, including 38-3 last year. That was a game where Ricky Slade ran for a couple touchdowns. Pat Freiermuth had a touchdown. Yatir Gross-Mattis had 3.5 tackles for loss. He was all over the place. And you mentioned before we started to record, you were at the game in College Park 2 years ago, 66-3. You'd love to see that again on Friday night.
Well, I sure would. It would make for a much more comfortable evening. But unfortunately, Maryland is this year's edition of Maryland so far looks far improved from that 2017 edition, where they were, I think, down to their first string quarterback at the very least. And actually, this time thus far, I guess, knock on wood for them, their starting quarterback still intact. Although their top offensive lineman and their fullback are both gone for the year now with injuries. So looks like that bad quarterback injury juju has affected other parts of the offense. But we'll get into that later on.
Yeah, let's talk Penn State's quarterback situation, of course. Going back to the spring, of course, you've kept us updated ever since Tommy Stevens made his decision, and it became Sean Clifford's team. Strong arm quarterback, obvious inexperience factor there. He has yet to throw an interception in 3 games. That's obviously a huge positive. 58% completion percentage. Just your thoughts about how he's directed the offense through 3 games, which obviously was extremely productive in game number 1 against an overmatched opponent, and then finally got it going in the second half against Buffalo, and then really struggled at times against Pitt 17-10.
Yeah, this has gone about what you would expect for a first-year starter with the talent that he's got. You know, he's had his good moments, and he's had his bad ones. I think people to remember too, Trace McSorley went through similar growing pains 3 years ago, and it really wasn't until, I'd say, the Minnesota or the Maryland game, about midway for that season, where he really started to establish himself as the guy. He was making better decisions in his reads in the RPO, and and not throwing balls into traffic, getting locked in on one receiver, knowing when to take off and run, those kinds of things. And Clifford, Sean's at a point where he's still trying to figure those things out. I think one thing that sticks out to me is late in the game against Pitt the other week. It was a 3rd and short situation. It's 3rd and 4. It's about a couple minutes left. They just need to get a first down, and they can basically run out the clock because Pitt had just 1 timeout at that point. And so instead, he tries to bomb a deep ball down the sideline, which falls incomplete. And I'm thinking to myself, why isn't he trying to look for Pat Freiermuth on a short route, or maybe there's an opening for him to run around, maybe just pick up a first down. So things like that, just getting a little better decision making. There's been a couple other times where if he had just handed off to the running back would have had a nice set of blockers in front of him to get a big gain. So I think that's something that's just it's gonna take time. It's not going to figure it all out in just 3 games. And I'm sure that he's a guy who, much like Trace, he's a guy who's going to be hardest on himself. He's a guy who strives to get better every day. And I'm sure during the bye week, he spent a lot of time critiquing his own performance. And I think he'll make some improvements somewhere, but he's still going to have his growing pains. And of course, remember, this is his first first road start ever. So, and it happens to be a night game, blackout on a Friday night, which is kind of a weird time to play a college football game. So we'll see. I'm anxious to see how much better he's gotten in the past 2 weeks alone.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down all the big matchups each and every week. It's a Week 5 game on a Friday night, as Tim mentions. Penn State going to Maryland, where the Nittany Lions have dominated the series since 2015. And we're talking up Penn State at 3-0, number 12 ranked in the country. We talked about it before we started to record, the third down issues. And unless you're playing somebody like they did in Week 1 against Idaho or get on a roll against Buffalo, third down's crucial because you're going to be playing good teams. You're not going to get first down conversions on second down most of the time unless you hit for big plays. So third down is crucial. It's an important stat. Penn State has not been effective. We would have to go through every play to see, okay, what happened each of these third downs? It could be an offensive line issue. It could be quarterback decision-making, inaccurate passing. Obviously, it could be a situation where if you're not gaining much yardage on first and second down, no offense can consistently convert third and 9s, third and 10s. So that could be an issue. But just kind of reviewing what you remember over the first 3 games, what seems to be the third down problems?
Well, it's twofold. On offense, they've struggled to convert on third downs. They're an abysmal 27% on third down conversions, which is good enough for 118th in the country and out of 130 FBS teams. So not good, Bob. Defensively, they've struggled to get off the field, and I've lost count how many times they've got teams in a third and long, third and 10 or more situation, only to see the other team just throw a screen pass, and that screen pass be just enough to move the chains, or to see them launch a deep ball down the field, which gets caught for a first down. It's not something I expected to see, and so that's something hopefully they've been working on in the bye week. Is to how to defend against the screen pass. I think part of it is because they have a tendency to blitz on third downs, and that teams know how to counter that. So hopefully they come up with a way to counter against that themselves. We'll see. They've got to improve in both those areas though. If they, especially because Maryland, I noticed right now they're 45% on their third down conversions offensively. So that's got to be something that's got to be on the minds of Brent Pry and the defensive coaches, is getting off that field. If they can get off the field too, that in turn can help the offense, because I think part of the other problem is in the Pitt and Buffalo games, they were not able to run as many plays because the defense wasn't getting off the field as much. And so I think improving in both areas, you're going to see, I think, more success on the field for Penn State. But those are things that definitely need to be, with Iowa, with the gauntlet of Iowa, Michigan State coming up next month. Those are things that got to be fixed now.
Absolutely. We got Tim Maiden on the line from SB Nation's Black Shoe Diaries, covering Penn State football, of course, and joins us on a regular basis to break down the Nittany Lions. And we're getting into Big Ten play on a Friday night at College Park. Your running back situation intrigues me. Ricky Slade is the guy that everybody knows about going into the season, even if you're just a general college football fan or don't really focus on Penn State. Everybody know, okay, Ricky Slade's replacing Miles Sanders, but it's turned out to be a much more complicated and crowded running back room than that. You certainly prepped us on the recruiting status of a Noah Kane, Devin Ford. They were 2 of the top 6 backs in the nation, according to the 247 composite coming out of high school. So it's not surprising that they've taken up some carries, and Journey Brown has been a playmaker as well. So it's going to be intriguing, Tim, to see who gets the bulk of the carries as the games become more important.
Indeed. And thus far for 3 games, Slade, it's hard to say the other. He's been a disappointment in the running game. He's only got a total of 21 yards net carries. He did, however, have a nice a clutch reception against Pitt the other week. Had a 40-yard pass, which set up Jordan Stout's school record breaking 57-yard field goal right before halftime, which tied a game that otherwise would have had Penn State trailing going into the locker room for the second week in a row. But you like to see Ricky improve on the ground game, and he just seems to struggle running between the tackles. I'd like to see him maybe try to run more to the outside, some sweeps. And Noah Kane, to me, the baffling part about him is he was responsible for Penn State's lone touchdown drive in the second half. And right after that series, in which he was picking up 4, 5, 7-yard chunks, just kind of dinking dunking it down the field, picking up the term home run hitter for a guy who can just break one down the field. It's more like a guy who hits singles and doubles, and you need that sometimes in your ground game. And he was doing that. And that seemed to be working quite well. And then we didn't see him for the rest of the game after that. And the whole rest of the game, I'm seeing other backs come, and I'm thinking, where's Noah? He's the hot hand. You got to ride him. I think that boils down to another issue of mine. I think it's getting to a point where I understand they want to get all 4 guys playing time, but they got to realize when you just got to ride the hot hand. Now, I do see they put Journey Brown now as a starter, and he did start for the Pitt game, so it's and that makes sense to me. He's been the best all-around back for the team thus far as running the ball is concerned, and he had a really nice 85-yard scamper against Pitt the other week when Penn State was backed up, near their own goal line. And that set up their first touchdown of the game. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Journey Brown does. If Ricky Slade can get it going in the ground game. If how much time does Noah Kane get? And will he continue to provide those singles and doubles that you sometimes need in your ground game? And Devin Ford, he showed that nice burst of speed in the touchdown run against Idaho. Maybe he can come out and do something like that and catch Maryland off guard. We'll see. I'll be curious to see how they handle the running back rotation now that we're into Big Ten play.
Penn State fans get used to on the offensive side of the ball. Looking at Antoine Brooks, he's one of the top tacklers in the Big Ten, got 25 this year, also one of the best, but coming back from 2018. And also a fine for them has been Keandre Jones, who was an Ohio State commit and signee, couldn't find playing time in Columbus, makes his way to Maryland, and he's got 4.5 tackles for loss and 3.5 sacks already on the young season. So that's the matchup of Penn State's offense against Maryland's defense. On the flip side, we expected this defense to be one of the best in the Big Ten, and despite the issues on the third down conversions, you got to feel a little bit better about the defensive performance against a Pitt team that looked to be pretty mediocre offensively, but then they hit up 35 against UCF in a big win the following week after you guys held them down to 10 points and 25 rushes for 24 yards. Now, pet peeve of both Tim and mine is the way they track yardage, rushing yardage in college football, where the sacks are included and shouldn't be, and it skews the yardage sometimes in regards to making the rush defense look a little bit stronger than it is. But they were certainly dominant in that category against Pitt. And Micah Parsons having an exceptional start to his season as expected. And the Penn State defense, again, they can work out some of the confusion and some of the breakdowns on third down pretty much as advertised as one of the best in the Big Ten, if not the country.
Well, certainly. I think just to expand upon that, the pass rush, and I noticed this against Penn, against Buffalo, they do try and get pressure in there. It always seems, at least until maybe around late third quarter into the fourth quarter, that they're just a split second or two late getting to the quarterback as he releases the pass. And I'd like to see them get home sooner than that. And I think if they can do that, if they can establish themselves sooner in the game, like in the first half, and really make life difficult for Josh Jackson, that Maryland offense, I mean, it can go a long way. It can allow them to set the tone from the very beginning and turn a game where right now the last line, I checked the line, it's only a 6.5 point favorite for Penn State. They turn a game where they're only favored by a touchdown and maybe end up winning by a few 3 or 4 touchdowns potentially. But we'll see. But I'll say this: even though they've had some shakiness in the passing game and the pass defense, but when you look, they've only given up. They gave up 7 to Iowa. They gave up 10 to Buffalo, 10 to Pitt, and for 3 games they've only given up 1 touchdown each of those games. So, and it reminds me actually of the old Tom Bradley defenses, the bend but don't break. They seem to give up yardage between the 20s, but when it gets down into the red zone, they tend to hold tough. Either hold them to a field goal or in Pitt's case, doink it off the left upright. But it seems that opponents tend to move the ball between the 20s well. But they toughen up once it gets down towards the red zone. I'd like to see a little less of that though. Really I just want to see him come out and just dominate, just be the defense that the fans were hoping this would be before the start of the season. And to do that, I think they need to get home sooner on the pass rush. And they've done a good job stifling the run games the past couple. I know Buffalo in the first half was doing well, but they stifled that in the second half, and they kept Pitt in check the whole game. So that was nice to watch. Now it's gonna be a little tougher with Anthony McFarland, Javon Leak, Tayon Fleet Davis, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Those trio of backs. I'm curious to see how they try to contain those guys, how they try to shut them down.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down all the big games of Week 5, including a rare Friday night affair in the Big Ten with Maryland hosting Penn State to open up Big Ten play. The Nittany Lions at 3-0, Maryland at 2-1. This has been a blowout for the last 4 years, but Vegas expects a much tougher game this time around with the Nittany Lions just a 6.5-point favorite, which leads me to my predictions below. You can grab them in the description section next to the voice of college football. Just grab that link and you get my Week 5 and my weekly predictions right there. Also at betnow.eu, you grab that link next to the hashtag #SamStrong, and you get a bonus if you use my promo code at MRTVCFB. You get double your money. So if you put in $100 for your account, you suddenly, I get $200 to your account on betnow.eu. Again, the promo code is MRTVCFB. So as we flip to the other side of the ball, you mentioned all those threats that Maryland has, and that's been one of the issues that they've given opposing teams the last few years. Even though they've only been a 5-win team the past few years, they drove Texas crazy 2 consecutive years, took Ohio State to an overtime last year. Anthony McFarland ran for 298 against the Buckeyes last year. Already had a couple huge games this year. 3 touchdowns against Syracuse, a $132 last week against Temple. He was the 3rd-rated running back coming out of high school, and he's lighting it up. You mentioned Javon Leak, averaged over 9 yards per carry last year, and he's on the same track this year. So it's going to be a challenge for the Penn State defense in regards to all that Maryland speed. They're going to be on carpet in College Park. If they get good conditions, they're a fast team, if nothing else. And another thing that we talked about, Tim, before we started to record is I think this is the biggest difference in Maryland football this year is Josh Jackson. They've got a capable quarterback who's not elite, but he's a top 20 to 30 quarterback in the nation. Had a couple good years at Virginia Tech, 33 TDs, 12 picks in his career. And he's a guy that's got an NFL prototype body, has a rocket arm. Not, again, great quarterback, 51% completion percentage, so he has his consistency issues, but at least they've got a capable quarterback there for the first time in a long time, and really an explosive offense.
Well, indeed, that's been Maryland's problem the past few years is not having a capable quarterback, or at least a capable quarterback went down with an injury like Kasim Hill did, and I think in 2017, Ty Pigram also went down as well, the backup. So they were on their 3rd stringer, and Max Bordenschlager, who, all due respect to him, he's not as good as Hill or Pigram was. But thus far, Josh Jackson, he's looked pretty solid. And now he didn't look so hot against Temple, and I'm sure the Penn State coaches we've been watching the heck out of that tape to see how they can what Temple did and how they can replicate what they did to try and stifle him again. But again, it kind of comes down to what I've said before, that pass rush needs to get home sooner. And I think the way that they can do that is the battle in the trenches. Now, Maryland, their biggest concern seems to be on the offensive line. Actually, both offense and defensive line, but especially the offensive line. I remember reading an article in the offseason that, or at least during, I think in August, they were moving a couple defensive linemen over to the offensive line. And that gave me flashbacks to 2014, Franklin's first year, when Penn State they couldn't even field it too deep as scholarship guys in the O-line because they were just decimated from sanctions and transfers. And they had to move a couple of defensive linemen over to the O-line. So never a good sign when you have to do that. And then, as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, the starting O-lineman Terrence Davis is out for the season now from injury. So, when you're facing a team, when you're getting the Big Ten play and facing Penn States and Ohio States of the world, the last thing you want is to lose a starting O-lineman like that. So I feel like Penn State really needs to exploit that, really needs to assert their will against that weakened Maryland O-line. They can do that, then it could be a long night for that typically explosive offense. But I feel like it's going to depend on how soon they can assert themselves, and hopefully it doesn't take until the second half to do it.
Yeah, Davis pretty much considered their best offensive lineman and certainly their most experienced in regards to games started. They also lost running back Jake Funk, who tore an ACL and had 7 touchdowns in his career, mostly from short yardage. We talked about Anthony McFarland and how explosive he's been. Certainly Penn State wrapped him up 12 yards on 6 carries last year. And if you're able to do anything close to that, you'll be in great shape on Friday night. Any more thoughts about this one, Tim?
Well, I'll be going to the game. I live about a half hour from College Park, going with a Maryland alum friend of mine. And so should be a fun night. I'm curious to see how the contrast of colors looks between Maryland's blackout and Penn State whiteout. The Penn State declared this game a whiteout. They want fans to white out on the road. So it's going to be interesting contrast of colors. I'm going to DVR too, so I'll see how it looks on TV later on. I'm curious to see what the atmosphere is going to be like, especially coming off Maryland's upset loss at Temple. It felt to me like some of the air had been taken out of the hype balloon for this game, because it was looking like we were on a collision course between 2 top 25 teams going at it on a Friday night to open Big Ten play. And that's not going to be the case now. So, but I still expect this to be a pretty fired up Maryland crowd, Maryland players. So it'll be interesting to see how Penn State handles that. And I'm curious to see what the makeup of fans is going to be too, because when I went 2 years ago, I'd say it was mostly Penn State fans, maybe 50-50 if I'm going to be generous to the Maryland fans. But I'm thinking might be a little more in favor of Maryland this time, but we'll see.
Yeah, they should be fired up. Sure, they lost a game to Temple, but I don't know that anyone expected Maryland to vie for a college football playoff appearance. So they're opening Big Ten play, and certainly this is their best team on paper, prepared to start to challenge some of the big boys in the Big Ten East. Not that they're quite up to it, but certainly their best team on paper to attempt to start to break through that Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State gauntlet at the top of the division. Tim Aiden on the line for Black Shoe Diaries. Please join him and the rest of the staff there at SB Nation in breaking down Penn State football as they get you set for the Maryland game on a Friday night. Tim, we appreciate you stopping by.
Sure thing, Mark. Thanks for having me.